place. We're going to let people trickle in the next 2 or 3 minutes. We've got a good list of people that should be attending, so we want to make sure that everyone is here for the start. Thank you.
Buenos días todos. Bienvenidos al taller sobre unidades de vivienda accesorias. Y estamos en este momento esperando que entren personas para estar ya todos listos para empezar. Gracias.
Mary, do we have some numbers on the number of attendees online right now?
There's 13 right now. So, and nothing's been, no one out. Well, a couple more people are joining. So maybe we'll just give it one more minute.
Yeah,
Philip?
I think so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think you could get started. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, once again, welcome to the community workshop on ADU and JADU ordinance update. I want to thank everyone for coming out and taking some time to participate in our workshop on a Saturday. Before we begin, I just want to make known that we do have interpretation services for Spanish speakers. We have Maria and Kimberly from Bilingva. And Maria, if you want to just provide some instruction to our Spanish speakers. Yeah,
buenos días a todos los hablantes de español que están asistiendo. En este seminario vamos a tener interpretación en español. Para escuchar el taller en español, ustedes van a ver dentro de poco un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Por favor, hagan clic en donde dice español y allí van a escuchar el contenido en español. Si tienen alguna pregunta que hacer, pueden hacer la pregunta y nosotros interpretaremos en inglés su pregunta para la audiencia y una vez que su pregunta sea respondida, la interpretaremos la respuesta para ustedes. Gracias por estar aquí. Buenos días.
Great. With that said, I'd like to introduce the City of San Mateo staff we have as panelists today. I'll be the primary speaker for this presentation. My name is Philip Brennan. I'm an associate planner with the city. We have Christina Horsberger, our CDD director. We have Alice Chen from our building department. We have Mary Way, our workshop administrator. And yeah. So before we begin, if I could just please ask that you participate in a very brief demographic poll. We'd like to get an idea of who's in attendance and your relationship with the City of San Mateo. If Mary, if you could pull up that poll, it's just 2 questions. And we would appreciate your participation. And while you're doing that, I just want to tell you about our workshop today. We're going to be providing an overview of the recent changes to the state ADU and JADU law. We're going to focus on obtaining your input on how these types of dwellings should look in our community. There's going to be an opportunity for you to ask clarifying questions and respond to poll questions. With that said, we want to make note that We ask that you limit your questions to the topics being discussed and the policies that are going to shape our update of our ordinance. The feedback that we receive during this workshop will help inform the development of a ordinance update, and we'll be bringing that to the City Council this summer. Great. Well, I think we can move forward with the presentation. Thank you, Mary. Provided to you, or what I'd like to go over is our workshop agenda today. We're going to be doing a background on how we got here, go over the basics in terms of what an ADU and a JADU is. We're going to touch on key terminology that you'll be hearing throughout the presentation. We're going to outline the provisions of the new state law. Again, we'll have that question and answer period, so you can ask clarifying questions regarding the topics that we'll be discussing today. We'll touch on the remaining areas of discussion, and we'll have the poll questions at the end of the presentation. So there's a lot of interest in our city and throughout the state regarding accessory dwelling units. And the primary reason for that is in January of 2020, several new ADU housing bills came into law, which took aim at easing local zoning controls, reducing fees, and expediting the permitting process. The larger purpose from the state's perspective was to facilitate another way to address housing needs across the state, which is an issue that we're all familiar with living in the Bay Area. Finally, we're here to hear from the community on how you want to see ADU development in your city to look like. That feedback will help in the development of our new local ordinance, which again will be brought to City Council later this summer. So what do these new laws mean for you? The new laws provide property owners flexibility and opportunity to develop their lots for any number of reasons. It could be to help accommodate a growing family. You could, for instance, have a young adult fresh out of college looking for a place to live independently and save on costs as they start building their professional career. Some property owners build ADUs to provide a place to live for their aging family members. Others simply build ADUs for the sole purpose of serving as an additional income resource. Whatever the reason is, ADU development increases housing stock in our city and helps address our local and regional housing needs. So what exactly is an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU for short? ADUs are known by many different names, including second units, guest houses, casitas, granny units, or in-law units. The state defines an ADU to mean an attached or detached dwelling unit that provides complete independent living facilities. And that means provisions for sleeping, eating, cooking, sanitation, and it's located, the ADU would be located on a lot with a primary residence. Finally, ADUs provide a lot of design flexibility. They can be attached or detached, constructed as an addition or as a conversion of an existing space or accessory structure, including garages, sheds, pool houses, things of that nature. And under state law, I did want to mention that manufactured or tiny homes meeting certain requirements are also defined as ADUs. So what is a junior accessory dwelling unit, or a JADU? A JADU is contained entirely within the walls of an existing or proposed single-family residence. JADUs are not permitted in multifamily zoning districts. This is typically a conversion of an existing bedroom or an attached garage. One of the primary distinguishing differences between an ADU and a JADU is that a JADU may share bathroom facilities with the primary residence. So before we go into the specifics of the new state regulation or regulations, it's important to go over some of the key terms that you'll be hearing throughout this presentation. We'll have plenty of time at the end of the presentation or during the presentation to answer any questions and provide clarity before you respond to the poll questions. We'll begin with floor area. Floor area is simply the area of a structure measured horizontally to the outside surface of the wall. In the example shown on the screen, you have a structure measuring 20 feet by 50 feet, which means the floor area for the structure would be 1,000 square feet. The second key term that you'll often hear in conjunction with floor area is floor area ratio. You get FAR by calculating the total floor area on a given site and dividing it by the lot area. So using the same example of the 1,000 square foot structure, you have a 5,000 square foot lot. That would end up being calculated as 20% FAR for the site. Each of our zoning districts prescribes its own maximum FAR for development. Another key term you'll hear being referenced is setback or required setback area. The setback area is the minimum required distance a building must be from a given property line. The area within a required setback is generally required to be unobstructed by any structure or building. The red areas shown on this graphic represent the front, side, and rear setbacks. The gray area in the center of the lot there is the buildable area, and that's where you can locate your building or structure. And the last set of terms I want to familiarize everyone with is building height and how we measure it in the city of San Mateo. So building height is the vertical distance measured from existing grade. Let's see if I can point this out here. So this would be existing grade to the top plate line. This area here, we're shown in a blown up view here. This is a bit different than most other cities, which typically measure the highest point along the roof, which is typically your roof ridge or roof peak. The plate line is where the roof or where the top of the wall assembly, which is the frame and studs of the wall, meet the roof structure. When we discuss building height, we're speaking about the top plate of the structure in relation to the existing grade. So as you can see in this example, you have a structure that measures 17 feet to roof peak, but the actual technical building height for this particular building would be 10 feet as measured from grade to the top of plate. So the next few slides will be discussing the provisions of the new state ADU regulations. Our existing local ordinance is not in complete compliance with the new state regulations. So we're currently imposing only those aspects of our code which are not in conflict with the state, and those areas which are in conflict, we're simply defaulting to the state regulations, which we're going to go over now. So a good place to start in terms of what the new state regulations allow is with the state exempted ADU, or what we call a by right ADU. The state requires that that cities allow a property owner to build at minimum an 800 square foot ADU of at least 16 feet with 4-foot side and rear yard setbacks of no more than 4 feet. And this by right ADU is allowed to be regardless of any local development standard, including lot coverage, floor area ratio, open space requirements, or anything that would otherwise preclude it from being built. So this obviously opens up the doors of opportunity for ADU development in our city and obviously across the state. Generally speaking, the remaining floor area ratio on a lot is what typically governs how that lot can be further developed. In this example, we have a 5,000 square foot lot in an R1C zoning district, which has a prescribed maximum of 50% FAR. So that means that the maximum floor area or total amount of structure that could be built on this lot would be 2,500 square feet. And in this scenario, you see the representation of a 2-story home that's maxed out at 2,500 square feet. What the state exempted ADU or by right ADU provides is that regardless of this lot already being fully developed with 2,500 square feet, the state says you can still build an 800 square foot ADU that's at least 16 feet in height with 4-foot side and rear setbacks. So the updated state law prescribes ADU size limits for agencies which don't have an ADU ordinance in place. Minimum and maximum size allowances are based off of the ADU development type, which can be broken down into the general categories of attached, detached, and conversion ADUs, as well as the by right ADU. An attached ADU is simply a new construction ADU, which is attached to either the primary residence or an accessory structure. We're currently defaulting to the state regulations that permit an attached ADU to be up to 50% of the primary residence's size. Please note that any new construction ADU, attached ADU, must abide by the 4-foot side and rear setback requirement. Detached ADUs are completely separated from the primary residence. The state allows a detached ADU to be up to 1,200 square feet, provided there's enough floor area allowance remaining on the lot. In this example, you have a 1,300 square foot primary residence on the 5,000 square foot lot. So there's plenty of remaining floor area remaining to potentially build up to the state maximum 1,200 square foot detached ADU in this scenario. And an ADU conversion is simply a converted area contained entirely within the footprint of an existing residence or even an accessory structure. And as such, you can utilize the existing setbacks, even legal non-conforming setbacks, provided that you build in the same location to the same dimensions. And there is no size limitation on the area being converted since it's not creating new structure. JADUs must be contained entirely within the footprint of a single family residence. They're permitted to be up to 500 square feet in size and require exterior access apart from the main residence, as well as, and they can have internal communication with the primary residence. The JAD must include at least an efficiency kitchen. That means it must include a cooking facility with appliances, a fruit preparation counter, and storage cabinets. There's no required parking associated with JADU development. One of the interesting provisions of the new state regulations is that it allows an ADU and a JADU to be combined on the same lot with a single family residence. So you effectively can have up to 3 dwelling units on the same lot. And ADU building height is a topic of interest in our community. Provided here is a graphic that will hopefully help visualize our discussion. The solid orange line at the very top shows the 32-foot maximum roof peak height, and the dashed orange line below it represents the maximum permitted building height, which is measured to top plate for single-family dwellings in our R1 and R2 zoning districts. Right now, without an ordinance in place, ADUs in our R1 and R2 zoning districts can be built up to these height maximums, similar to the larger home that you see on the right. The dashed blue line beneath those 2 orange lines represents the state required minimum building height. The single story home depicted there on the left measures 16 feet to roof peak, which satisfies the minimum state requirement. And in fact, many of the cities in our county have simply defaulted or established the 16-foot height as their height maximum for detached ADUs. We've discussed how we measure building height in San Mateo. So when we speak to allowing an ADU to be at least 16 feet in height, we're talking about allowing the plate height of at least 16 feet in height. Shown here is an example of a 2-story ADU designed with a plate height that meets the state's minimum building height requirement of 16 feet. It has a roof peak height of just under 24 at 23 feet. It should be noted that the city hired a consultant to do a height study looking at the feasibility of 2-story ADU designs with 16-foot plate height and 24-foot maximum roof peak height. And the study found that with certain architectural designs, a 2-story ADU is feasible using those height parameters. Provided here is another example where we show a 2-story ADU built over a garage, except the building height is now at 20 feet, meaning the plate height, and an overall height measuring 28 feet to roof peak. So please note that we'll be revisiting building height for detached ADUs as one of our poll questions later. As we consider establishing a maximum building height for detached ADUs, when we update our local ordinance, we have to consider not only the maximum plate height, but also the roof peak height. With regard to parking associated with ADU development, the state requires 1 off-street parking space per ADU or per bedroom, whichever is less. The recent regulations continue a trend of being more permissive and not allowing required parking to be an impediment to ADU development. So one of the new requirements stipulates that when you convert a garage or a carport or demolish it in conjunction with developing an ADU in its place, you're not required to provide replacement parking. Additionally, the state offers a number of parking exemptions that preclude the need to provide off-street parking associated with ADU development. Generally speaking, most residents in or most properties in our county, or excuse me, the city, qualify for exemption number 1, which is speaks to when an ADU is located within 1/2 mile walking distance of public transit. Despite that, I did want to make note that approximately 10% of our residential properties are not located or would not satisfy that criteria, and therefore would be obligated to provide off-street parking associated with the ADU. In terms of additional special provisions of the new state law, the state law now provides a pathway for homeowners to defer correction of certain building code violations for up to 5 years upon request, provided that the correction of that specific violation is not necessary to protect health and safety. And this obviously provides the benefit of legalizing many ADUs that cannot be brought up to 100% code compliance. In addition, the state now allows ADUs to be developed on lots that have an existing multifamily development. So you can develop or have multiple ADUs within non-living spaces within a multifamily development, meaning you could have it in a boiler room, a storage room, carport, garage. You can convert up to 25% of the existing units in that multifamily development into ADUs, as well as build up to 2 detached ADUs on that site. So at this time, I wanted to open it up to the attendees to ask any questions. I know that we went over a lot of technical information, and just by the nature of the topic, it's sort of dense. And so it's very nuanced. And so I'm happy to answer your questions. I just want to remind everyone that we want to limit the questions to the topics and policies being discussed in this presentation. If you have any questions regarding a site-specific or project-specific question, I'm happy to answer those. You can contact the planning department or even me directly. My contact information is available. I'll have my information on one of the slides, and you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to help you with that. So with that said, Mary, do we want to open it up or do you have some questions lined up?
I do, Philip. So I will, Sean, you're the first person to ask questions. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Hi, Philip. So I have 2 questions. One is about the efficiency kitchens of JDUs. The other one is about the garage.
Okay.
So you were at my house a couple of years ago, and so I'm trying to make a general question, but once upon a time, the definition of efficiency kitchen was beyond onerous. It was horrible. And then you sent me a thing where the language had been changed, and it looked like it was quite forgiving. You were more limited just by the size of the JDU rather than you 6 feet for the counter, et cetera. What is the definition of an efficiency kitchen right now?
We have Alice from our building department, and she may be able to speak with more detail regarding that specific question.
Before we get to the answer, I'll give you the second question.
Okay.
It has to do with the garage. You say you can convert a garage, but I assume that, if you're in a 2,500 or 3,000 square foot home, you still have to satisfy the garage requirements for the home at large. I can't just take my 2-car garage, pull the cars out of the garage, say, hey, now there's a bed in there, and be done with it. I assume you still have to have a garage. Could you clarify that?
If you're speaking specifically to if you're converting that attached garage into a JADU, you are not protected by the same exemptions that are provided for ADUs. So we actually have that as a poll question, if that parking should be replaced or should be exempt. So we'll revisit that when we do the poll questions.
Okay, those are my two questions. I'll wait for the answers. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so our next speaker is
Oh,
Nancy.
well, let's give Alice a chance to respond to the
Oh,
efficiency
sorry.
question.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no problem.
Yes, regarding to efficiency kitchen, the definition I can find is in the efficiency dwelling units in building code, and it simply explain that the efficiency kitchen should have a kitchen sink, cooking appliance, refrigeration facilities, each having a clear working space of not less than 30 inch in front. And so that's all. There's no very specific dimension for all the appliances or units. So 30 inches is the only thing I found for the clear working space.
Right, and just a quick follow-up. So I know the state, the previous state ordinance, which most cities followed with regard to JADUs, the new state regulations have been revised to be a little more purposely vague in terms of technical requirements outside of that 30-inch specification that Alice mentioned. And that is to allow more flexibility to property owners. Mary, feel free to move to the next question.
Okay, Nancy, I'm going to, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Nancy.
Morning. Wanted to ask about the daylight plane facet of what you're talking about here, because if you're building 4 feet to setbacks, what not having daylight plane requirements means your neighbor yard could be shadowed, and privacy concerns are obviously tantamount in this discussion. So what, yeah, just knowing, having been involved with home building, that the city has strict daylight plane requirements. So how do we deal?
So we can still impose our local daylight plane requirement. As it happened to be, just sort of serendipitously, our most restrictive daylight plane requirement when you have a setback of 5 feet is a vertical line that extends 45 degrees towards the interior of the lot. And so where that point meets at 5 feet is 17 feet. So we can actually still impose that daylight plane requirement on ADUs without restricting an ADU to be at least 16 feet in height. Okay, so we're still imposing the daylight plane requirement. So that will help to regulate like 2-story ADUs in terms of sort of looming over neighboring properties while still allowing them to build a 2-story ADU.
So what you're saying is, if someone has the big enough lot to build a 2-story ADU far enough from the lot line that doesn't impose on the daylight plane of the neighbor, that can be done. However, a 2-story structure at a 4-foot setback would not be allowed with the daylight plane restrictions.
No, what I'm saying is, even with the 4-foot side and rear setbacks, we can impose our standard daylight plane requirement on that 2-story ADU, and without restricting the 16-foot requirement. And that will also help to sort of prevent 2-story ADUs from having that visual impact on neighboring properties, the same way it does for our single-family homes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, our next question comes from Jeffrey Mark. Okay, Jeffrey, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just have 2 brief questions. The first one is, do I understand correctly that the minimum height of an ADU is 16 feet and I cannot build one that's shorter than that? And The second question is,
Mhm.
there's a bus stop that's a quarter of a mile from my house.
Mhm.
Does that mean that I'm exempt from having to build a parking facility for a new ADU?
Right. So I'm really glad you asked that question, so we can provide some clarity on that. So what the 16-foot height requirement from the state is saying, it's not saying that property owners are obligated to build an ADU of at least 16 feet in height. All it's saying is that a local agency such as the City of San Mateo cannot impose any development standard that would require someone to build an ADU less than 16 feet. If you want to build a single story ADU with using a traditional, 10 or 11 foot plate height, that's totally your prerogative. It's just saying that the city can't make you build anything less than 16 feet. You can design your ADU however tall in terms of less than 16 feet if you want. That's totally up to you. With regard to the being within a quarter mile, yeah, it's the state exemption is within a half-mile walking distance to public transit. So, just taking what you're telling me for face value, yes, you would be exempt from being required to provide parking for that ADU.
Okay, and that's according to state law or according to San Mateo law?
It's according to state law, which the City of San Mateo, as well as every city in the state, is obligated to abide by.
Ah, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from C. Preston. C. Preston, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, yes, question.
Hi.
The rear yard setbacks, my understanding has always been, in most of our neighborhoods, I think, there's a 25-foot rear yard setback. I think what you're saying here is that the state has gone over the top of the cities for ADUs and said that you can build on that. That's my first question.
Mm-hmm.
I always understood that the setback on the sides was 5 feet,
Mm-hmm.
building code. The other question I have is, house I used to live in, there was a utility easement. And in the backyard, the main sewer line ran back there. And on my parcel map, it showed a 5-foot utility easement on my side of the fence, as well as my neighbor behind me.
Okay.
Would the city be able to push back on the state and say, no, there's a...
Right. Yeah. So to answer your two questions in order, yes, that you have the right read. The state law supersedes our local ordinance in that it allows an ADU to be located within 4 feet of the side and rear setbacks. So yes, it would supersede our local ordinance, and that's the case with every city in the state. With regard to utility easements, I can just answer that sort of generally. If there's existing easements that are like no build easements where you can't locate a structure within an easement, I believe those supersede the state requirements. So that's something that is still in play, or a consideration that would potentially impact an ADU from being located that close to a property line or within an easement.
That would be caught probably during the plan check process. Where if somebody went to City Hall, they would say you got a utility easement behind you. You can't use.
Yeah, that's definitely Yes, sorry to cut you off. Yeah, that's something that's definitely checked during plan check. Next question, Mary.
Okay, hold on. Next question is from William Blake. William, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, William.
Good morning.
Morning.
Two questions. Well, first of all, I don't live in San Mateo, but my daughter does.
Okay.
So anyway, the setbacks, I understand the setbacks from the property lines.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a setback from existing structures? And the second question, you mentioned a garage being converted. If the garage is a detached garage,
Okay.
then the ADU could be built without having to build a new garage, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So in terms of your first question regarding clearances between two structures. Our requirement is 4 feet open to the sky, meaning like if you have roof eaves on 2 structures, you need to have at least 4 feet clearance between the roof eaves. So in this case, like the ADU, a detached ADU and the primary residence need to be separated by 4 feet. And yes, to answer your question, just to make it clear, you can convert a detached garage into an ADU and not be required to provide replacement parking.
Okay, and if I could ask one more question along with the garage. If the garage is a 600 square foot garage, the 1,200 square foot allowance would allow 600 square feet to be added to the garage or above the garage?
No, so the 1,200 square feet is not what we would call a by right provision. It's just simply establishing the maximum. Your floor area for a lot, or what you can do, is going to be governed by the available floor area allowance that you have remaining on the lot.
Right.
Yeah.
The property has about 1,600 square feet of floor area under roof right now.
Okay.
It's
So
it's a 4,900 square foot lot. So
right. Yeah. So I again, I just want to remind everyone, we want to try to keep these questions.
Right.
So I'm happy to, if you want to contact me outside of this workshop, I'm happy to go over the site specifics and the project specifics or the proposal. Yeah. And I'll help you with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Mary, you want to go to the next question?
Yes.
Philip, Mary,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to ask something because the first question is regarding the separation between main house and detached ADU. Planning code, as you mentioned, 4 feet separation, open sky. But I just want to remind people that there's still fire resistant construction requirement in building code. So if you put 4 feet, you still need to make sure the fire separation is meeting the construction type is meeting the code, and also the openings limitation that's allowed by the code need to be considered.
Good information. Yeah. Thank you, Alice.
All right. Our next question comes from Eric Holm. Eric, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Philip. Actually, I have a handful of questions. One's follow up from just the last question. That 4 foot clearance, is that just for the main house, or does that apply to accessory structures? In other words, can you have an ADU attached to a garage, but meeting all of the fire codes and stuff, not have 4 feet from accessory structure?
You need to, so we're talking about regardless of the structure, whether it's a primary residence or another accessory structure, if you have detached structures, including an ADU, it needs to be separated from any other structure by at least 4 feet, free and clear to the sky, as well as the fire rating requirements that Alice mentioned.
Okay.
If it's attached to the garage, then obviously it's not detached, so there's no requirement there.
Okay, so only if you detach it, then you have to detach it by 4 feet.
Right.
Okay. I thank you for this presentation. I saw your presentation on Thursday as well, and just my other questions or comments are kind of related to some of those things.
Sure.
One of them in the series of questions you have at the end, one was about asking for style opinion as far as if people thought it should match the style of the main house and such. In looking at that, are you looking at making exemptions for cases where it doesn't, or ability to have design review? Because, for example, on your Q&A slide here, the really modern wood-clad box probably doesn't match any buildings in San Mateo, and that looks like it's a prefab. So that would preclude someone from putting a nice little small modern structure in their backyard.
Yeah, to answer your question, so I think the question that we are posing in the poll question is speaking to like new construction from the ground up. I think, well, obviously, we want to be accommodating. We want to allow for, the whole, a variety of ADU building options, which would include prefab, such as this example that you see in the photo. So there obviously would likely have to be some sort of exemption for prefab builds in terms of meeting that objective architectural requirement.
So you're looking at the architecture requirement being only if you had like a new house and ADU build together.
Well, if you're building an ADU from the ground up.
Oh, non-prefab. Gotcha.
Yeah, non-prefab.
Okay. And then one of the other questions you had was about balconies on ADUs. Are you looking at cases where that's in the setbacks only, or would you be looking to outlaw balconies in all cases, even if it's, you know, an ADU in a backyard with a balcony on the front of the ADU, so the balcony is basically overlooking the yard of the residence?
So I think what we have in mind, and I think the way that's it's articulated in the question, is that we want to see if there's interest in precluding balconies when they're facing a neighboring property. So if it's facing a side yard, looking into the neighbor's side yard, or facing the rear yard, looking into your neighbor's rear yard. If the balcony is in the interior or looking back at the primary residence, then that's a different situation.
Okay. Yep.
I think our CDD director wanted to jump in real quick.
Philip, I just wanted to point out that the purpose of our questions is to find out what the community wants to do. So we've got some options on the table, and if we don't have all of the options that are in folks' minds, then we would want to hear that too. So in terms of the design regulations, we are looking at a variety of ways that we could have design regulations, but we don't have to have design regulations. And so we want to hear from the community on whether or not that's something that's desirable, because we recognize that for many folks, it may be less expensive to do something that doesn't match. But at the same time, there may be many folks in the community who do want to see things that are complementary. We have been looking at a variety of different types of prefab and different kinds of units. And there is a wide variety, and more keep coming on the market all the time. And so I think that there are options where you could have something that is a different variety of something you've seen before that does speak to the elements on the home. And that's also the reason why in the options that we gave, one of them is about matching the architectural style, and one of them is more specific and really just hones in on the colors and materials and the use of trims and things like that, because we think that that's something that could be easier. And so I just did want to point that out, that it's not so much that we're making suggestions, it's more that we're trying to get feedback and to provide options that seem like they're doable and they're representative of the things that we're expecting to hear and what we've heard so far.
Thank you for that clarification. My last question would be about the by right 800 square feet that you're allowed for an ADU. My understanding is that if you've maxed your FAR, you could build up to 800 square feet above the FAR. But if you built the ADU first and then wanted to make a change, you don't have that right. Have you considered just allowing that 800 square feet if it applies to an ADU, regardless of sequence of events, so that you would allow someone to build an ADU, move into it while they were to remodel their house, or someone that converted a garage into an ADU and then decided, hey, they really miss having a garage and wanted to build a garage? That would not be necessary. That would not be possible depending on the sequence of events.
Yeah, I mean, we'd really have to look at all the potential variables, but you know, as you know, you're afforded at least an 800 square foot ADU. If you build a 1200 square foot ADU, then that would obviously, the excess of 800 or the 400 square feet in excess would impact how you could develop the rest of your property. So that's all. That's a good question, and something that we'll look at more closely as we start developing the ordinance update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question comes from Alana Gomez. Alana, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I don't live in San Mateo, but I live in South San Francisco.
Okay.
My question is what the tax liability will be for a homeowner who would have to pay extra in valuation. I called the county assessor's office, and I also spoke to somebody from another agency called Hello Housing, and they said that the valuation comes from the city. I spoke to the county and they said they come out and appraise the property. So I have competing statements.
Okay.
What is the regulation on that? Who determines how big your property tax bill is going to be?
So was that your only question, Alana?
No, I had another one actually.
Okay, so well, why don't you go ask your remaining question?
Related to the fees as well. Is it a local ordinance that would require fees to be paid to the school district above a certain amount of square feet? Or who determines that? Is that a local code that needs to be, so that's also included in my estimation, whether or not I can afford this.
Okay, so I'll answer your questions in order. And again, I just want to remind everyone that we'd like to limit the questions to the topics and policies that are discussed in the presentation. In terms of tax assessment, the county assessor's office that falls under their purview. The city doesn't weigh in on that or determine that. In terms of the impact fees, the state requirements exempt any ADU of less than 750 square feet from impact fees. In terms of the school fees, I believe the school district defines those fees, and I think that they're, and maybe Christina can correct me, but I think they're in line with the state regulations or consistent with the state regulations.
I would just like to steer away and for a bit and just mention that whatever fees are in place that you're going to need to pay are going to be specific to the city that you live in and that you're building in. You mentioned that you live in South San Francisco. And so we're here today to provide clarifying information on the City of San Mateo so that we can get feedback on the future policy development for the City of San Mateo. And so fee questions for ADUs in a specific city are really better directed to that city. We don't know how South San Francisco handles and applies their fees. If they have special provisions for ADUs, which some cities do, those are really policy questions for the city you live in. As Philip mentioned, the county tax assessors is the one who would be able to give you information about how taxes are assessed for ADUs. And in terms of the valuation, that would be associated with your city and how your city assesses that. So I would highly recommend that you contact the Planning and Building Department in the city of South San Francisco and get information from them directly. And I think that would probably be a great starting point for you.
Great. I think we have time for a few more questions. Maybe we can go to 11 here.
Okay, great. Richard, you're allowed to talk now.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, this is really not much of a question. I was just curious, people who are set back from the street, are there regulations on how they receive their mail? That could be an important question, actually.
Okay, are you talking, sorry, are you concerned with addresses or?
Actually, both. Yeah, placement of a container to receive mail and whether they have to have a separate address.
Yeah, I believe our Public Works Department is now requiring separate address assignments when you have an ADU or JADU. In terms of, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, we do require separate address assignments for any ADU or JADU.
Yeah, it could be a privacy issue for people on where they receive their mail.
We could explore that. There could be, we could say something if we hear that there's an appetite for that, or if we hear from our internal folks that we collaborate with, that it would be helpful. I'm guessing that from the postal company, they would probably prefer to have something that's easily accessible and next to what's already there. And so we might be able to explore adding a provision for that.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have one more. William Blake has another question. So go ahead, William.
Yes, back to your design things.
Okay.
Are you looking at possibly allowing cargo container type construction for ADUs? And the second question would be, the County of San Diego has some set plans that they put on their website for ADU construction. Are you considering anything with some possibility of some set design plans?
Yeah, I think the answer to both of your questions is that they're both on the table. I've seen some great things done with cargo containers that you wouldn't be able to tell it was a cargo container. So I think we would probably look at that the same as a prefab or modular ADU. But yeah, we definitely are looking at that, as well as pre-approved designs, which is I think what you're referring to. In fact, we have probably in this near future here, we'll be having internal discussions on pre-approved design program. So we're exploring that.
Oh, and one last question. On your website, you have a link where, you go out, you find out what the zoning of your property is. And then it also has a thing that says, sorry.
Okay.
And the other question is, are you in the FEMA flood zone? And then it takes you to the FEMA map and you determine if you're in the flood zone. And then it doesn't ask you anything more. In other words, like, if you're in the flood zone, are there requirements for like a raised foundation versus say a cement slab, something like that?
Yeah, that's typically required. Alice, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I think that falls under your purview.
Yes, so if your property is located in a flood zone, you will need to meet our floodplain ordinance, management ordinance, and you will need to either, you'll get a base flood elevation certification and raise your living area above the base flood elevation, and anything below the flood elevation, base flood elevation, has to be water resistant material. So yes, there are requirements if you're hitting the flood.
Thank you.
Great. Mary, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we actually have a few more coming in. The next is Roy K. Roy, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, Roy.
Thank you. Hi. I just had a follow-up question on the question that the lady had about fees. Is there a reference sheet or a sample sheet that we can refer to for a typical fees, city permit fees, a list of fees that are associated with ADU? I know it's case by case, but it will help people to get an idea.
Yeah, so the fees are actually available on our fee schedule. In San Mateo, we charge a flat fee for both an ADU and a JADU. So it's not dependent on size in terms of the permit.
I would also add that we recently, through our building department, developed a sort of a cheat sheet for ADU fees. And so it has the building permit fee along with the different related fees and links to where you can access information. So we could put the link in the chat.
All right, thank you.
Oh, there is no chat. We can actually, if you contact us offline, if you're unable to find it on our website, then we can share that link with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. Sean has another question. Sean, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. So with the ADUs, will you be either required to have a new electrical drop from PG&E, or you'll be required to pull from an existing service panel, or you have the option of doing A or B? Working with a new drop from PG&E is really, really expensive. So I'm kind of curious where that goes with ADUs.
Yeah, Alice, do you want to respond to that?
So it can be both. It's really depends on your choice and how, if your existing panel is enough to support the usage of the ADU. So you can put a sub panel. If you have enough capacity in your existing panel, then you can put a sub panel for your ADU. If you want a separate bill, then you will need to contact PG&E and install another panel.
Okay. Okay, Mary, any other remaining questions? We have 5 minutes till 11.
No,
We
we're
could-
good. We're
Okay,
good.
so why don't we move forward in our presentation and just touch on,
I'm sorry, Philip, one more question.
okay,
We'll let that sneak in since we have 5 minutes.
yeah,
Jack, would you like to talk? You can unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, I'm an architect in San Mateo, and I recognize some of the other people online here. Just a couple of things. One is that in my experience, the city has not required a separate address for ADUs. They just leave it up to the property owner's discretion. In regard to standard plans that the city would automatically accept, I suggest they look at the heart of San Mateo County website, because they're in the process of negotiating with all the cities in the county to have standard designs that could be more or less approved given a site plan and Title 24 calculations. So check heart of San Mateo County. Thanks.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. So the address assignment is a recent requirement from our Public Works Department, and we are actually going to be meeting with HART, or discussing HART internally and their pre-approved design program. So we're aware of it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're good to move on, Philip.
Okay, great. So just want to touch on the remaining areas of local discretion. A city can still apply development standards, including park height, setback, size, architectural review, and standards that would prevent any adverse impacts to a registered historic property. The big caveat is that whatever standard the city establishes or adopts cannot preclude that state exempted by right ADU that we discussed earlier. So with that said, I wanted to segue into our poll questions, and we just have 9 questions that we'd like you to respond to. I'll provide you with a brief question prompt and then ask the question. And again, we'd really be helpful, and we'd be thankful if you could just all participate, because this will help inform the development of a new local ordinance for the city of San Mateo. So with that said, let's begin. So state law establishes that an ADU will be allowed to be at least 16 feet in height. Our code currently defaults to the building height maximum specified by the underlying zoning district for ADUs. However, our existing ordinance was adopted during a time when ADUs were not permitted in multifamily zoning districts and were restricted to just 640 square feet. All of the zoning districts, residential zoning districts in our city allow building heights well above 16 feet. So we can continue to default to that underlying zoning district. However, now that ADUs can be built up to 1,200 square feet and built within 4 feet of shared and side property lines, we're interested in hearing from you how tall detached ADUs should be. And so going back to that graphic that we looked at earlier, these are 3 examples of proposed maximum plate and roof peak heights, which coincide with the answer choices on the poll. So we have a 16-foot plate height, 24 foot to roof, 20 feet to plate height, 28 feet to roof peak, and then the 24-foot plate height and 32-foot roof peak height that is utilized by our R1 and R2 zoning districts. Mary, can you please pull up poll question number 1? Okay, we'll just give a few more seconds. We have, we have 21 of 23. Hopefully we can get the last 2 attendees to respond. Okay. Why don't we stop it there? Great. And just as a reminder, Christina, if you can grab a screen grab of that, that'd be helpful. Okay.
I've got it. And I'd like to remind you, I think we might have one attendee who may not be participating in the polling question.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, well, we can close that out. And we'll move on. So the state law mandates that ADUs are permitted ministerially through a building permit process. However, while ADUs are exempt from discretionary review, the state does allow for objective architectural standards to be imposed. Some examples of from our existing local ordinance that can still be imposed include offsetting windows from neighboring properties to maximize privacy, and requiring ADUs to be constructed of the same architectural style and exterior material finishes and paint scheme as the primary residence. With that in mind, we have the following 2 poll questions regarding objective architectural standards. Mary, can you please pull up poll question number 2? So this is asking what design features of a detached ADU should match the primary home. And sorry, to be clear, you can select all that apply, multiple choice. Okay, we'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, I think, Mary, we can end it there. Interesting. Okay, so it looks like with this, at least with the attendees in this workshop, matching the design of the primary residence is not of great importance. Good info. So we'll move on to our next question. Mary, can you pull up poll question number 3? So this is asking which of the following objective design standards for 2-story detached ADUs should be required to limit privacy impacts on neighboring properties. Select all that apply. Okay, we have about half the attendees replying so far. Great. I think we can end it there, Mary. Awesome. Okay, poll question number 4. So currently state law specifies that cities which don't have a compliant ordinance in place must allow attached ADUs to be at least 50% or up to, I should say up to 50% of the size of the primary home, and detached ADUs may be up to 1,200 square feet. However, should we establish a maximum ADU size here locally with our new ordinance, that maximum must allow an ADU to be at least 850 square feet for a studio or 1-bedroom, or at least 1,000 square feet if it contains more than 1 bedroom. If we don't adopt a maximum, then we'll simply refer to the we would simply refer to defer to the state specified requirements. So with that said, Mary, can you please pull up poll question number 4? So please select what you feel the maximum size of an attached ADU should be. Select 1. Okay, just a few more seconds. Great. I think we could stop it there, Mary. Awesome. Thank you. For poll question number 5. So the state allows cities to impose a restrictive condition on development scenarios when a detached ADU and a JADU are combined with a single family dwelling on the same lot. So we discussed this earlier. This provision allows a local agency to impose the following restrictive conditions specified in item 1 and 2 there. So we see here with the graphics, the build out potential without the state imposed size limitations. And in the other graphic is the build out potential with the state specified limiting conditions. So poll question number 5, Mary, if you could pull that up. We're wanting to know which of the following should the city do in terms of those restrictive conditions. Select 1. Okay, almost there. Wait a few more seconds. All right, great. Mary, I think we can stop it there. Looks like there's strong sentiment to not impose either of the conditions. Good information. Thank you. And we'll move to the last poll question of this section. So individual parcel sizes in San Mateo's residential zoning districts can range anywhere from 2,500 square feet in terms of lot size up to 3 acres in size. State law specifies that a detached ADU can be up to a maximum of 1,200 square feet in size. So Mary, can you please pull up poll question number 6? So we're wanting to know what the maximum size of a detached ADU should be. Please select 1. Wait just a few more seconds. We typically get 21 of 23 to respond, so we're asking that one last attendee to respond or give them a few seconds. Oh, 22 of 23. Okay, I think we could stop there. Thank you for that. And then we'll go into just our last few poll questions and we're almost done. With regard to off-street required parking, most residential properties in San Mateo qualify for one of the state's parking exemptions, specifically exemption 1, which exempts required parking for ADUs located within 1/2 mile walking distance of public transit. However, it was noted earlier that approximately 10% or roughly 2,600 properties located in one of our residential zoning districts would not qualify for that exemption. So Mary, can you please pull up poll question 7, please? We'd like to know, should the city exempt all ADU development from required off-street parking? Yes or no? We'll wait a few more seconds. Okay, Mary, I think we can end that poll. Great. So state law permits a property owner to develop their lot with both a JADU and an ADU, in addition to a single family residence. The increase of dwelling units on a single lot may have corresponding impacts to on-street parking in residential neighborhoods. As such, additional on-site parking allowance may need to be considered to offset the potential impacts to on-street parking. Mary, can you please pull up poll question number 8? The city, which should the city consider in terms of parking allowances for properties being developed with either an ADU or a JADU? Select all that apply. We have 18 of 23, so let's try to get the last remaining attendees to respond. That'd be very helpful. Okay, Mary, I think we can end it there. Awesome. Great, and we have our last poll question this morning. Junior accessory dwelling units may be created within the walls of a proposed or existing single-family residence, including attached garages. However, attached garages which are converted into JADUs are not subject to the replacement parking exemptions that ADUs are. Mary, can you please pull up poll question number 9? The question is, should JADU conversions of attached garages be required to provide replacement parking? Yes or no? Awesome. We got 23 of 23. Okay. We can end it there. Fantastic. Well, that concludes our workshop today. I want to thank you all for participating. Public participation is a critical part of the planning process, so we really appreciate you taking time out this morning to listen to our presentation and answer these poll questions. It's really informative and will help us in developing our local ordinance.
Philip, we do have another question coming in, so I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, we have a few minutes.
More. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, David, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there. Yeah,
Hi, David.
I didn't really have a question. It was more of a comment, but I couldn't tell from the structure of the presentation if there was going to be a comments. You know, I tried to literally. Anyhow, what I wanted to say is that going through the process of trying to build an ADU, specifically did not want to destroy my off-street parking. I have a very large lot, but I'm running into a problem with floor area ratio. And it turned, after thinking through this, I think decided this was an important comment to share with the process here, which I think that the by right ADU should also exempt parking from floor area ratio calculations. The reason is that if we don't exempt parking from floor area ratio calculations, then people that are out of FAR can't build the parking spaces. And we want to encourage that. And more so, we're encouraging, if we don't exempt floor area ratio for parking, we're encouraging people to destroy their garage parking, their existing parking, to create ADUs. And it will also solve the problem of the 10% of people that don't have parking exemptions because of public transportation. They literally, in most cases, I believe they won't be able to build an ADU because they won't be able to construct the parking that's required. So I just strongly suggest we take a look at exempting parking from floor area ratio for the by right ADU and maybe all ADUs. That's it. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, David. Do we have any other questions, Mary?
Yeah, we have a couple more coming in. Richard Hedges, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, just Philip, if I may, just one of the things I think you need to consider. I do a lot of walking. I walk through many neighborhoods and I see garage doors up. And I would say in some neighborhoods, half of the people that live in those neighborhoods, their garages are already full of stuff. They're not parking in their garages. So I was pretty much against requiring people to put in additional parking spots because they're not using them anyway. So I think that ought to be a consideration in doing these regulations, to realize that a large number of people use the garages already for something else. That's all. I just want to make a comment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I noticed in your language earlier, Philip, that the creation of JDU could be done from the creation of, or the conversion of an existing bedroom. I kind of mentioned this before in some comments a year or two ago, but what if it's a family room? I mean, that the restriction that you already have to have a bedroom in place on the plans is a bit onerous, because now someone has to go through an extra step of creating a bedroom before they can actually go on to the next step of creating a JADU.
Yeah, that's not
any part of the house.
Yeah, Sean, that it actually can be any room in the house. It's not limited to a bedroom.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, Philip.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for everyone for participating. Please reach out to the planning department or me directly for any specific ADU related questions regarding your property, or just any general inquiry regarding ADUs. I'm happy to answer that, as well as my colleagues in the planning department. Thank you all again. Thank you, Maria and Kimberly, and staff. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye now.